All right, so I was so excited to be on Calvert's podcast, Real Estate and Wealth, a couple of months ago. They had me out to talk about my real estate investing journey. I bought my first house when I was 23, and I'm going to be 44 next week. And the whole time I sat here chatting with the folks at Calvert, all I could think about was these guys. These are clients that I've had the opportunity to work with as a mortgage broker over the last few years that are really invested in their real estate journey. And it's been so cool to just see them develop through the journey after being like a one-man marching band. I didn't really know anyone else that was young and female and all in on real estate investing until I met these guys. So the whole time I sat here, I was like, man, there's people that have way cooler things to say than I do, and I want to have them on this podcast. So anyway, here we are today. I want to introduce you guys to Sydney and Jenna, two clients of mine that have been absolutely kicking ass in real estate for a long time. I just want to chat with them a little bit about what it looked like to actually start, because I think that's really hard for people, right? To just start, to just buy that first property or that first investment property. I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves a little bit. Let's start with Sydney. Tell me about how'd you get involved in real estate? How many doors do you have now? Talk to me a little bit about where you're at.
That was a lovely intro. Lots of compliments. I started when I was 23 and I'm 28 now. So it's been 5 years. I kind of just fumbled into it. I didn't think I was really intentionally trying to invest in real estate. I was in a really small apartment with my partner during COVID, feeling like really tight, wanting more space. But when we actually went and budgeted out to get more space and, rent a bigger apartment, things got really expensive really fast. I just remember sitting down and being like, what are my throwaway costs for option A? I'm renting. What are my throwaway costs for option B? I'm buying. And when they start to hit that middle ground where they're the same, why not? Like, why wouldn't I try? At that time, interest rates were really low. And it just kind of made sense. And I remember I was just looking one night on the internet. I think I Googled like how to buy a house in Calgary, found some random website, clicked on it. And my now realtor then cold called me. Like he had something set up where he got a notification when someone went on the website.
Yeah.
And immediately called me. He's like, hey, I'm Austin. Do you want to look at this house? And I was like, why not? We have nothing better to do. Let's do it. And that's how I kind of fumbled into my first house.
I think we had that conversation a little bit earlier, before we were recording about evaluating the cost of renting versus buying. I talk about it a lot in my business and I help people run those numbers. There are times in your life where renting makes sense. If you're only planning on being somewhere 6 months, listen, rent. But if you're going to be invested in a market for, 3 years or more, buy.
If you just are not looking down the road, but month to month. I think it's also lifestyle specific. The place that we got had a basement suite. So I was only looking at places that had a basement suite. I talk to some of my friends and I run these numbers with them all the time. And some of my friends have really bougie taste. And so it doesn't make sense to buy because to buy that house is way more than it is to rent. And I think it depends on like the city you live in, your preferences for your home is. But for us, especially like if we were okay having a basement suite, it doesn't take long to run those numbers. And I think it's like very eye-opening.
Jenna, tell us a little bit about how you got involved.
I started investing roughly 7 years ago-ish. I think it was like 24, 25. I'm doing my math right. But yeah, at the time I was kind of looking for something entrepreneurial that I could do to build wealth or create multiple income streams that wasn't going to take me away from my actual career and my actual day-to-day. So my realtor at the time, Nathan, definitely helped me to push me into that and said, I think this makes sense. Again, running the numbers to especially 2018, roughly, like we still had pretty low interest rates and it made sense to take that jump. And it was almost cheaper to buy at that point than it was to rent. So that definitely kind of, I guess, got me interested in it. And then I guess once you start doing it, you're like, oh, this actually makes a lot of sense. There is a lot of ways to like make money in this and do different things with different types of properties. It became a bit of an addiction in some ways.
It's so fun.
So how many houses have you now bought in the last 7 years?
I think I'm 5 or 6, but I guess 5, but multiple doors on some of them.
Yeah. Super cool. And how about you, Sydney? How many?
I'm at 5 homes. One is an up-down duplex that we have both the top and bottom. It's 10 doors, but I live in one of us. I need a place to live.
Yeah. I love the idea that you sort of get into it. And I think you hit on something, Sydney, when you said that a lot of my friends have bougie taste, especially early on. If you could have that mindset that this is an investment, this is actually a way for me to build long-term generational wealth. It's not going to be like, I don't need the granite countertops today. I can listen, whatever. I like granite countertops, let's be clear. But, I don't need that today. But like ultimately, how can I start generating some wealth,
Yeah.
building some equity without massive costs.
When we first started with my very first property, I was like budgeting for how many haircuts I was going to get that year, trying to like just make it work with the first deal. Now, over the last decade, you're like, now I can buy as many haircuts as I want. So it's like worthwhile that like short-term sacrifice to get to that like long-term goal.
Totally.
You'll get to granite, don't worry.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you're going to get to your pixie cut, you know?
Exactly.
But yeah, it is true. You give up a lot, right? My husband and I, when we were in it, you know, we've moved through different stages. We were in this acquisition stage of just like, how can I get $1 more for a down payment to get, you know, that much closer to buying my next door in real estate? We gave up a lot of stuff. It would be nice to go to Mexico 3 times a year, but maybe that's not possible that year. You do have to make some sacrifices for massive long-term gains. Listen, none of us are that old, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
That's what's so
We get
cool.
the same things in 10 years that you're like, now, all right. I feel like the first like couple years is definitely more difficult, but like it gets easier as you go on with it for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So did you like to buy that first property? Did it feel scary?
Crippling.
A lot
Really?
of sleepless nights is how I would describe it.
Really?
Yeah, I felt pretty stressed. I
Yeah.
remember doing the what if game over and over. What if I lose my job? What if I lose my job and I can't find a basement tenant? What if I lose my job, can't find a basement tenant, and all of a sudden nobody wants to live in Calgary ever again, and now Red Deer's the hot spot? What if interest rates are 40? It just like it cycles. It snowballs.
Totally.
And
You're
then
like,
all of a sudden you're like,
worst case
if
scenario.
this actually happens,
Yeah.
like I'm gonna probably focus on survival because the world is collapsing.
Yeah,
like
dude.
some of these things are so extreme.
Can I get 3 jobs at the same time to
Yeah.
be able to support
How
this?
many hours can I do? There's that one podcast that's like 6 to noon. That's my first day, noon to 6. That's
Yeah.
my second. I was like,
Totally.
totally me. That's so scary. I think it sometimes it still is scary even now.
Yeah. And was there something that helped you overcome it? Like what allowed you to sign at the lawyer's office? You know, like how did you get
I
there?
think maybe playing off on yours, just because I feel like now we're talking the same language here. But I would say like playing out that what if game for me has helped. Is I definitely always think like doomsday and what's going to happen if like the worst case scenario, but actually having a plan B, plan C, plan D for all the alternatives or all the different like strings you can pull if you run into that scenario. Because I think a lot of people get, I guess, nervous when making an investment because they're like, what if something goes wrong? Sometimes things are going to go wrong, but if you have a backup strategy, you have something, you're like, you're not as fearful. You have feel like you've already thought through and you're not like panicking in the moment as much.
Yeah, we do the same thing. I call it my exit strategy. So in that first house, I remember I made like scenario 1 to 10. And it was like, if this scenario happens, like my monthly fixed costs are always going to be the same, but you know, this variable fluctuates, then what? And I think, just having your exit strategy is huge. The other thing that I found really helpful is once you've decided that's your exit strategy, you vet it, you know, it works, like trust it. Because for my first house, I'd be like, hey, have this exit strategy. And they'd be like, what if my exit strategy doesn't work? It was just like, no, you've decided this, trust yourself. You did your research. You have the strategy. Now you don't need to hyper fixate on these issues. They can stay. And if they happen, you go to your strategy and you move on. They don't need to consume all of your brain all of the time.
I feel like that like most fearful time frame for me has always been that time between when you buy the property and you're renting it out and you're waiting for that first lease to be signed. And you're like, you're like, I bought the best property that I can possibly find and no one's going to rent it. No one's going to want it. You're waiting you're waiting on Rent Fast or whatever ad you're using, right? And you're like, it's been 15 minutes. Why has no one called about this property yet?
Okay. All right. So let's actually do the math. So like it's sometimes, you know, maybe at 5 tenants for you, 9 for you. At one point we were 26 families of tenants for us. Has there ever been a property that didn't rent?
Not that it didn't rent, but took longer than I thought. We just had crummy timing for an acquisition actually this year, where it was really close to Christmas. And usually I do acquisitions or leases ending like end of April or like end of the summer. And those are hot times of year where you get like 40 applicants for a unit. But to have something listed, and then we had an unfortunate water damage that just we weren't expecting that pushed our listing date out to like end of November.
Yeah.
It's just like a slow time of year. So we didn't get a lot of bites and it just took longer than we were expecting. But by December 1, we had a tenant in paying the amount we wanted. So like it does, that was my like closest being like, oh, this is not the best feeling ever. But for the most part, it's like after the 15-minute goes up, it's 2 hours and you're like, okay, now I have a bite. Like you always find a tenant.
So guys, I just want to, because I'm a lot older than these ones. She just said, usually within 2 hours. That's insane, guys. Like we run our numbers with percent vacancy because like 100% divided by 12, because there's 12 months in a year. You know, that's why you take 8% vacancy off your numbers. And so like, I've never actually had a property sit when it was ready to go for more than a couple of weeks
Yeah,
usually,
yeah.
right? Like she also said December 1st, they had a solution, right?
Yeah.
So it's like interesting that you're like, that's my worst case scenario. In
Yeah,
5
it's
years
still
and
really
9
good.
properties, like
Yeah.
it's so good, right?
Yeah.
And I think, and I'm not trying to, diminish
Yeah.
what you're
No,
saying,
it's
but
true.
it's
After
like,
you get it, after I got the lease, I remember sitting back and be like, why was I so stressed? But I did this time around. I was like, my mantra is it's going to work out. My mantra is it's going to work out because we've had like slower units before and I've let the stress like kind of consume me. So I was like, it's going to work out. It's fine. And we have such good tenants. They're so good. Like it
yeah,
does work out. It
Yeah.
always works out.
totally.
It's like-
And would you say,
Oh,
do
I
you
was
have
gonna
any?
say, yeah, just definitely worth it to be patient for the right tenant.
Oh, I know. You're
too.
like about to cave on the person that said they're going to breed dogs in one of the bedrooms. You're like, well, I have to settle this because no one's calling me.
You're like, my son, my mom, and my chinchilla are moving into this one bedroom. And you're like, I don't know about this.
And you're like, yeah, okay, maybe not, maybe not. But no one else called. So then, yeah, holding out for our tenants.
Yeah, if it feels wrong, it's wrong. Like I just,
it's
yeah.
definitely wrong. Don't do it. Yeah.
But you have to get burned a couple of times before
Yes.
you really can
Totally,
appreciate
yeah.
that. Yeah, we've had a few wild ones over the years. So I'm curious, you guys both said, I know like you both still have big jobs, like big full-time careers that you work as well. For those of you who don't know, actually, when we were doing all of our acquisitions, I also worked downtown in oil and gas. I traded commodities for a decade. And so, when we were doing all of
that's
this.
so fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't been a mortgage broker. Like Jenna was like one of my first clients. Isn't that
I
unbelievable?
had no idea. I would have never
Make
known.
it till you make it.
Yes, I would have never known.
But you know what? I had put my money where my mouth is a lot of times before I did your
Yeah.
mortgage. I had the boots on the ground.
I felt like I was in
experience.
good hands.
Yeah, I just felt pretty good. Yeah, it was good.
But so, yeah, I've only been a broker for this is going to be year 8, and so so I work downtown too, and so. I also think this is interesting because I'm really big on like when I'm talking to real estate investors, a lot of people get their first house and they're like, I'm going to quit my job because I'm a real estate investor now. So you guys have done lots of mortgages. I've done lots of mortgages. Mortgages are hard. Like getting mortgages is hard.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways that we were able to acquire lots of houses was having good jobs downtown.
Yeah.
But that's a lot to be a real estate investor and work downtown. So talk to me a little bit about how you guys balance that like on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. You go.
I
I want to learn from yours
Generally,
and then
I've
answer.
self-managed mine just because I feel like when you put that much work into something and you put that much of your own money into something, I like to have a lot of control and
Yeah.
oversight in it. And I mean, obviously, as you grow and you scale and stuff, you probably have to like take a step back on that. But generally, I like to be involved. I like to know who's in my properties. I like to, make sure that they're in good condition, all of that kind of thing. I have found like at certain points, if, my career was too overwhelming, I work in oil and gas as well, then it did make sense to take a step back. So I have used property managers in the past, but I would say I've used people that have managed my property that I knew well and trusted. I wouldn't just, cold call somebody and then hand over one of my assets to them. But I think generally I prefer to self-manage them. But like, I think you can go either way if you have the right people in the right seats there.
Mm-hmm. And is it a situation where you feel like your phone's ringing off the hook all the time with real estate, or is it pretty calm?
I would say it depends more on the tenants. Like right now I have like amazing tenants that I'm like so thankful to have. And, I'd say
You're like, never leave.
yeah, literally, if they want to live there until the day they die, it'd be amazing because they've just been so easy to work with. But like at the time, I had a couple difficult tenants. I like didn't have capacity, and I also was like working out of town quite a bit too. So it was hard to manage that and not be in the same place where I had my property. So at that point, it was like helpful to have somebody step in. But now that I'm back in Calgary full time, it's a lot easier to self manage.
That's awesome. I think that's such valuable insight just to anyone listening that I think, there's not a one-time answer to that.
Yeah.
It ebbs and flows with your life, and you have to, be confident enough in who you are and the business that you're building to say, I need help right now to make this, successful for me, and so that I can be healthy and do my other job well. And maybe I have to give up a little bit off the top because I need them managed. But then maybe at a different time in your life, that's not the case, right? So
for sure,
I think it's really cool to have that insight. Yeah. How about you, Sydney? How do you do it?
I always have the same reoccurring dream that I forget about one of my properties. I completely forget it exists, and then 5 years later, it's like I have this property that I've forgotten all about, and it's vacant because sometimes they're just that easy, and you forget about them.
Totally.
Yeah, you're like, I own that thing, and then you'll have a month where it's like somebody's locked out of their house in the middle of the night. There's water leaking somewhere. 2 tenants are fighting over parking, and there's something's not working. A furnace is broken, and you're like, when it rains, it pours. And I find those months feel really hard, and I have started to try to lean on other resources of contracting some stuff out. I do a lot of repairs myself and I'm saying this as I'm really trying to start doing it, but I'm trying to do the stuff that it just doesn't make sense for me or like my mental health to take on, like fixing appliances. Like, I don't know how to do that. So it's just me and YouTube and sadness for 12 hours.
Me and YouTube and sadness.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I don't need to do that. Why am I doing that? Just pay the money, Sydney, and get the person to come in. So that's something that I've started to do. I mean, it sucks when you get the invoice, but to let someone else come in and help, that's helped a lot. And then when I hit 7 doors this summer, I just kind of was like, I need to stop until like my spouse wants to get on board. And he ended up hopping on board and wanting to stick with it. And so the other half of the portfolio is shared with him.
Yeah, that's really cool. I would love to transition into that conversation because so spouses. So these guys are my main points of contact, obviously.
Who is Renee? What's her last name?
And my husband, I was very much the catalyst in our real estate journey. And Mike is now, all in. He's actually, cool story. Mike is 8 years older than I am, so he's in his 50s now. But when we started this gong show, 15 years ago-ish, he was a little bit hesitant and he retired at 50, you guys. So, get on board. If you're a girl, thinks real estate's a good idea, they're probably right. And now, I'm here today and Mike isn't. So, but anyway, what I was going to say is it took some convincing. I knew this was what I wanted to do and I just felt so passionate about it. And I did all the research and, but he was nervous. He comes from just a little bit of a different background. His parents have done amazing, but they're really big on just debt reduction, really big on eliminating risk. I'd had a rental property with a bad experience 30 years earlier, and he just wasn't super on board. And so it took a lot of convincing, and we're there now, right? Mm-hmm. But even, when we were both working downtown and acquiring these properties, and you get that call that something's leaking and it's noon, and we're both like, well, I have a meeting and I have a meeting. Whose problem is this? We really had to be able to get on the same page and say, at the end of the day, we're doing this because we believe in real estate as our pathway to generational wealth, period. And so it doesn't matter who does it because united front, this is what we believe is going to happen for us. But that's hard. And I, as a mortgage broker, see so many people get divorced. That's a big reason people call me is, hey, we're getting divorced. We got to split all our shit in half, right? Yeah. They sell all the investment real estate. And a lot of the times it's because they've been fighting about the investment real estate, right? And so I want to hear from you guys. Like, how's it going? Talk to me about it a little bit.
It's been a journey. I have the best partner in the whole world. Nate is literally just like the best human on planet Earth. He's awesome. I will say though, he was very anti-rental properties. He brings to the table like presence. Like he is very live in the now, enjoy the now, which real estate is the long game. So when we wanted to get the first house, I remember being like, Kate, we're going to do this thing. We're going to move to this neighborhood that you don't want to live in, that's far away from your work. And it's going to cost us a lot of money. And also it's going to be a bit of work. We're going to have to renovate. And also it's not going to be super cash flow positive. We should do this. And I'm like, but like, it's going to be really good in 25 years. And he's okay. The now of that story sounds terrible. No, that was really hard. So the first one, he was like, no, I don't want to do this. I'll pay rent. I'll literally be your roommate. I'm on board for that and that alone, which was fine and worked really well. And I think we had a good agreement. And then I think I did the wrong strategy in the beginning. And I was like, if I just force him to do this enough, he'll learn to like it. And so I feel like I kind of gaslit him into buying a house. So Nate actually forked out the down payment for our second property because I just had no cash to do it. And I was like, you give me this money, it'll be funny. It was not fun. It was not fun at all. I'm like really hands-on. I like to do a lot of renovations. I'm really into building and like renovating spaces. I really enjoy that as a passion. So we bought a fixer-upper. Nate hates that. He doesn't like tenants. Like he doesn't like any of this. And so we had a couple really hard years that were just like him being like, this isn't what I wanted. I don't like this. And so it was a lot of me doing all the work by myself and being really resentful because he's not doing this thing that I forced him into doing. So we pivoted. Obviously, we're still together and we're very happy. So I pivoted to just like doing my own thing again and being like, if you want to come along for the ride, I'd love you to, but you don't have to. And so I got very fortunate that I was able to use a property that was mine to buy another property that was mine. And so that was a year ago, and that property just did really, really well. And Nate set really good boundaries right beforehand. I'm not coming in to help. This is not my job to come and do this with you. It's not my property, but you got to keep all the cash. And then this summer, we just went on a long road trip. We were stuck in the car for 16 hours, and we were like, let's just do some retirement discussions, which we've done a lot of retirement planning before, but actually talking about how much do you want to spend in a month when you're retired? How much do you want to spend traveling when you're retired? How old do you want to be when you're retired? kids? Are we having daycare? Are you staying at home? Am I staying home? What does that look like? And so we did that. And then I said, okay, well, this is what it would look like if we threw one more house in the mix. This is what it would look like if we did one more house. Just kept doing that and saying, okay, this is our plan. We have to retire at 50 and we have to work full time and we're doing daycare. One more house. Okay, we can retire at 45. We can retire, like going back. And I think him actually seeing like our portfolio feels small until you're doing that. And then you're like, oh, we're actually like a third of the way there. We can do this. We can get to this deadline. And it was a same messaging of, if you want to join me, join me. And it was like he just drank the Kool-Aid and was on board. And we did 2 acquisitions together in October. And it was so fun. It's so different than Strathcona Park was the house that I kind of forced him into. He was excited to go to the properties. He was excited to renovate with me. It was like a team instead of me mothering him to force him to do this thing. And since that shift, it's been so fun.
I love that.
A slow journey.
I love everything about what you said, though, just from even the fact that so many people talk about retirement and they don't talk about a path. Yeah. And ultimately, investing in the stock market with $50,000 is really probably not going to get you there. If you want to get there faster, you need to use leverage, right? And I love that real estate can just be part of that conversation. And it's not for everybody. Real estate is a very, very easily obtainable way for average people to get off the treadmill a hell of a lot faster.
And
right?
I think it's an interesting concept that you're talking about. It's hard for people to like be scared of debt, right? And I think I definitely had that mindset. I think a lot of our like parents' generation have that mindset
like,
that debt is bad. And that's like forced into you as a kid, which I actually think is really good. And it's good to be able to manage your money effectively and everything. But I think there's also like that misunderstanding of some debt is maybe bad debt, some debt is maybe good debt. And you can use that differently. And like obviously having, a bunch of credit card debt is very different than having an asset that, can make you money, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
100%. Yeah. On what you were saying of like $50,000 of investment, I think like saying is one thing. Actually spend the time and do the math, because that's what Nate and I did. We had $100,000 in equity in a home that we could take up from the home and do X with. And he was like, I want to do this. And I was like, obviously I want to buy a house. So we actually did the math. Like, let's see, what does this look like if we invest this? Even if we go and get someone who's very intelligent in the investing space in stocks versus a house, what does that look like? And actually running those numbers, Nate was just floored. I had no idea that the gap was this big. Like, I thought it was not that big of a gap. So why would I would choose this like mindless, not have to think about it, very low effort. And that was big for us.
Yeah. I think, if you like build that wealth in real estate and you get that ability to leverage and make money off of your total investment rather than just your down payment, it's so crazy, especially when you're starting out. Like, I definitely think if I took the money that I put into real estate, put it in stocks right now, I don't think I'd be in the same position. And now if you want to pull out and you want to go into stocks, and you want to go diversify, you totally can. And it's hands off after that point and collect, right?
Yeah. So Jenna, you've made these decisions on your own. And so maybe not as much in terms of compromise, but certainly you're on your own then too, right? There's not somebody else that can be like, hey, do you have my back? Can you do this? So talk to me a little bit about, do you have another support system that you use, or are you just feeling like you got this?
I think a lot of it is like, you have to get really good at problem solving when you're running things on your own. Obviously, like if it's just you can move into any property you want to. If you decide you want to be in a, 1-bedroom condo, or you want to be in a basement suite, or you don't have that partnership that maybe holds you back in some of those ways.
Yes.
But then I think obviously if you lose your job and you no longer have income, or you don't have the savings you might have in a partnership, you kind of have to think about, okay, well, what am I going to do if I run into these problems? So I think it can be like an advantage and a disadvantage. Obviously, more income, you can leverage higher and you can get other stuff. But I think, I think it's a lot easier to move when you're younger and building wealth in real estate, because you don't have to uproot a partner or uproot your family or all these things that make it pretty hard to move into a 1-bedroom basement suite if you need to, right?
Yeah.
Not everyone wants to do that with family, which totally makes sense. So
I think you make such a good point, because a lot of my clients say like, how do you get that next down payment? And we've been fortunate in Alberta because we've actually had this appreciation the last few years, which has been amazing, right? But we also all bought a lot of properties and they were flat for a long time, right? 10 years plus in my case, they were totally flat, no additional equity except for mortgage pay down. But I do think it is interesting because you can buy any house that you want to buy with 5% down if it's going to be your principal residence, even if you own 10 other homes. And so I love your point about like, when you're young and you're nimble, move.
Move.
You guys have done tons of it too, right?
Such a hack. And it is definitely a hard sell. And I think it sucks. Moving sucks. I'm not going to deny that it's shitty. And I think that there's so many sides to the coin for that. But I think it is a sneaky way to keep cash in your pocket all day long. And if you can do it, and like I am very happy to say that I'm now finally out of that phase and I will never move again. But like for every time it sucked, it was worth it. It was so worth it to move. And now it's something that even to this day, I'm like, Nay, what if you stayed here and I moved so that we got this house? I think that could work. Like, I think
love
that's
that.
like a good hack. Yeah.
I should try that on Mike. I don't know. The 3 kids and the dog.
I'll
like
go.
You stay, I'll go.
Like,
yeah,
I'm sure we
we
can
got
fit
this.
this 1 bedroom.
Yeah.
It'll be totally fine.
It's fine.
But no, I say this to clients, like as they're talking, and they're like, should I save the 20% or not? And I'm like, I promise you, I literally have a child that plays the piano. So I joke, I'm like, I literally have a piano tied to my ass. It's not just an expression in my life. I really do have to move a piano. And I promise you, I don't want to move a piano anymore. That's just not a thing.
Yeah.
So there is a window to put the gas pedal through the floor if you want to acquire property, right? And I do believe wholeheartedly, and especially like in Alberta, and this is people like, you can buy houses for 500 grand or 600 grand, right? So like 5% of 500 grand is 25 grand.
Or
like
even less if you're willing to go rural too.
Yeah.
Which is just crazy because when you think about, we have line of credit that's $30,000 that like you could just like quickly turn over and do that. Not that I think that's like the best idea you should do all the time, just to put that caveat in there, but like 20 grand, yes, is a lot of money. And I don't want to downplay that that's not a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of things, like you could drop that tomorrow and go and make that deal. That is a really low barrier of entry once you get into real estate, that if you can get in a house for $25,000,
it's wild.
Yeah, like why not? Because now you have a $500,000 property that you're growing inside your portfolio.
And I think like when you're younger too, like you have more ability to get roommates. Not to say it's not socially acceptable to have a roommate at 30 or 40 or whatever, but when you're in your 20s, most of your friends do have roommates, and it's a normal thing, right?
Yeah.
And so I think like a lot of people, I remember even being 25 and people are like, well, why would you want a roommate? I'm like, well, I was like, I like to build wealth at some point here. So I think, taking that step back and sacrificing that temporarily, especially, is a lot easier at that age, and it's a great advantage to take that you can, if you can.
Yeah. No, I honestly, I was just talking to a client yesterday morning, and he was like, I don't think I want to look at 1 bedrooms. I want to look at 2 bedrooms. And I'm like, why wouldn't you? You're like 22. Of course you want a roommate. Like, live as close to free as possible, right? Yeah. Like, and why would I do that? Because it's all about just buying another house.
Yeah, like, just getting another one in 100%.
Yeah.
I do think that was something that was really hard from working with a spouse, was that like Nate doesn't want to move. Like, he didn't want to move. So that was hard. That I think that like when you have autonomy if you're like young and single and you're getting into this space, like move, because you never know, like the love of your life may never want to move again. And we struggled with that for 3 years, where we like couldn't acquire because we couldn't move, because he was like, that was just a boundary for him that you like have to respect.
Yeah.
I think like I moved up to the suburbs, which was like not a big hit with any of my friends, and we all wanted to hurry and live downtown. I'm not sure it totally balanced out with the Uber trips from downtown to the suburbs, but like it was definitely like worth it long term, because I just couldn't at that point get into a place that was inner city. Like, it was too expensive. I didn't have the down payment. I couldn't get approved for something like that. Like, obviously you remember working with me, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna take the step back, go to a community I'm not interested in, and that has been like, that house has gone up massively in appreciation.
Your favorite house. I remember the same thing.
Yeah, and I'll never let go of it.
Yeah, and you're like, I just love that. Mine's my Tuxedo Park. I now want to live in Tuxedo Park. Driving down 16th in rush hour is just hot garbage. But it's my favorite house now, because I'm like, that compromise sucked then, but now it's just like,
cool.
It's a good house in a good neighborhood that worked out well.
That's awesome. And so talk to me a little bit about, once you get one, then you can kind of do some things. Like, have either of you sold one? I know the answer, but
yes, I have sold one.
Okay.
Yeah,
I haven't. I'm curious.
And
okay.
that one was kind of unique because it was like during COVID, right? So it was like, harder to rent initially. I was like, oh, we're not finding tenants for this. I was like nervous to buy it. And then the market just flipped during COVID and went from nothing is selling, no one's buying anything, to this is the craziest market I've ever seen. And I never thought we would have like appreciation in that sense. And so it was amazing. So I was like, at that point I was like, do I refinance? Do I sell? And I think at that point I was like, I just want to lock in this gain. Mm-hmm. So we went through and it sold, I think, in 3 days or something like that.
Yeah.
So
yeah. There was another investor that I worked with that he ended up selling a place during COVID. Same thing. Like, he made so much money so fast, but he couldn't refinance to get enough money out to turn that into another house. He couldn't quite make the numbers work. So he's like, I'm going to sell it and then buy one house with 5% down, and then, a
Yeah.
smaller property with 20% down as a rental. And so like he turned one house into two really fast,
Yeah.
which was really cool. It gave him some flexibility also to put a deposit on a new build, which then appreciated while things were moving up. So there is a time and a place, I think, where selling to just free up the equity, especially if you're getting immediately back into the market, can be really beneficial, right? Because just for those that don't know, you can only refinance up to 80% of the current value of the home. So there's still 20% of that equity that's just locked in the property. Yeah. Although it's changing this month in Canada. If you want to add a legal suite, you can, or a secondary suite in your property, you can refinance up to 80%, or excuse me, 90% of the value if you're adding a suite. Yeah, effective like January 15th. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
So it's really cool that you can refinance into this like CMHC insured loan on, a rental property to add additional housing. It's like one of the additional housing measures that the government has in place. So I think that's going to be cool, for investors that maybe want to like add more cash flow to a property.
Yeah.
The numbers on suites are like, we should talk about this. So suited properties?
All of mine are suited, yeah.
One a legal suite.
Okay. And would you say cash flow wise, suited properties is the way to go?
I think it depends, I guess. I think generally, yes. And I think if you would ask me this question like 4 years ago, for sure, because there wasn't as much supply of them in Calgary as there is now, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like now they're newer communities, you can actually go buy a suited property. So there's more coming into the market in that way, which I think is awesome, because I remember like begging the builders being like, just put a suite in my property. And I think they've done it in other cities and stuff. So I think that's awesome that we're getting that. I think that'll make Calgary a more affordable city for people. I think it's always like, regardless of whether or not it's always makes sense financially to do it, it's really nice to have that secondary option, right? If you can't rent a giant house
That's where we were at,
to a full family, you can split that, and that kind of changes like what tenant profile you're able to bring in. So I think it's always like a great option, even if you rent out the whole thing versus you rent out two parts, like it's an option to have it, right?
Yeah, because you can always, depending on how the doors are set up, but like I have a few properties where you could just rent the whole thing and just literally open the doors up. But I found early on, I just couldn't stomach the risk of having the house vacant when it's a full house. To have a $4,000 mortgage and it be vacant for a month, I just didn't have $4,000 to fork out for that. And so I just never considered it. And then it's now something that I'm open to, but the numbers just don't work as nice. Like I find often it's like a suite, the numbers just work out nicer. Like I find more houses with a suite are above that minimum threshold for like my search criteria than houses that are not. Although I will say, and I remember talking to Renee about this years ago, of reducing the number of people you have to talk to. I have 9 different families, and like 3 of those families are in one building. So it's like they don't get along. So that to be like, if that one building had the same cash flow with just one family or one point of contact, so a lot of times you only talk to one of the tenants, right? Like you don't talk to both the husband and wife. It is nice, like from like you're like from a reduced stress and effort. And so I'm definitely open to it, but I just haven't, the numbers have just worked out better. And now that I'm finally at a spot where I could stomach having it be vacant, I just haven't seen a property that met the criteria.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. I want to just circle around to property types. So the thing that we have in common, we all bought like residential real estate. And so one of the reasons that I stuck there is because the exit strategy was like, the end of the day, if I am buying, essentially a entry level or starter type home in Calgary that is residential real estate, I'm not just trying to sell it to a real estate investor. If the shit hit the fan in my life, anyone could buy this house. Like a family could buy this house, a first-time home buyer. So like I wasn't buying an obscure commercial property where you're looking for a very specific buyer to take you out if something happened, right? Yeah. And so certainly for me, I've found that buying, somewhat, I'm going to call them like average or normal properties has made them, they're easy to sell. They're easy to get mortgages on. They're easy to rent. We've always bought in Calgary or Edmonton. What do you guys think? Do you agree that that's kind of, that sort of this keeping it simple has been a good strategy? Or
I actually did try to swerve out 2 summers ago. I was like, I'm buying an apartment building. I had just learned about that MLI or MIL Select deal that the government had on, and I was like, I'm doing this. Like I'm going to get an apartment building. So I spent the summer looking at apartment buildings, and it was such a boys club. Like it was so hard to get into, to break into. I found it was like what was available was shit. And then I would talk to them, and for commercial, this was new to me, was that your realtor comes, but the realtor selling is also there. So there's always 2 dudes that are
Yeah.
there together chatting, and you show up and they're like, oh, are you like the assistant coming to, and I'm like, no, I am the buyer.
Barf. Yeah.
Thank you very much. But then they would chat about deals that they'd seen. They'd be like, oh, did you hear that property that came through? And I'd be like, what about, I didn't see that. I didn't see that online. What are you talking about? And they'd be like, oh, well, it doesn't come online. And so how does one get their name on the list to see that property? Because the one we're looking at sucks. And they're like, oh, it's kind of in the group, like in the know. And I was like, I want to be in the know. And so I
Yeah.
found that it was really hard to break into because, and when I had talked to different people, they were like, you kind of just have to buy one. You got to buy the one that's available. And then once you're in, it's way easier to get in those conversations and network with those people. But to get your first like apartment building, you kind of just have to pick the bottom of the barrel that comes all the way to the web because none of their like private buyers
Yeah.
wanted it. So then I pivoted away. But I am still open to that. And I think that is something long term that I would like to pursue. But it was really, really hard to get your foot in the door in that space.
I would agree. Yeah. How about you, Jenna? Have you ever thought about pivoting out of residential?
I mean, I like residential. I think I'd say I like try to diversify as much as I can within residential. Just because I like sometimes you're like, oh, this works really great mathematically, but if you buy the same house from the same builder from this, you might end up with the same problem multiple times. So I always like
Yeah.
fear that a little bit. So I'd say I like diversify within the residential space in terms of like, okay, well, this might work really well if I'm, 25 and going to school, or this might work really well if I have a family, and then you can like hold some of those assets for like a longer term time frame. So I always try and think of something like I would always be comfortable living in.
Mhm.
Is kind of how I approach that. But I mean, I'm
Mhm.
definitely open to like expanding and interested as well. I just haven't
Yeah.
quite like examined it as much as I
Yeah.
probably should. Yeah.
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 I like the idea of owning, an apartment building. I like this idea, but at the end of the day, what I'm happy that I did was start.
Yeah.
And starting with an apartment building is super hard.
So hard.
It's so hard. And so, at this stage, maybe there's an opportunity to pivot in the future. But like for right now, I've got cash flowing suited and non-suited properties, in Calgary and Edmonton. And I feel positive about it right now. And I do think as you sort of move through life, like we're certainly in the stage where like we sort of did our acquisitions
Mhm.
and now we're making that decision about, okay, we've got this equity, we've got these properties that are now partially paid off. How can we make that money work best for us, right?
Yeah.
Like where is the highest and best use of that money and my time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the more properties you have, even if you have a manager, the time invested is a lot, right?
Mhm.
This is not truly passive income. I think
Yeah.
we can probably all agree on that,
yeah.
right?
Make
There's-
money while you sleep is a lie.
yeah,
Yeah, totally. This is like a
there's-
part-time, maybe full-time job, depending on how it goes each month.
Depending on the month, I feel like acquisition month, it's like you are working 17-hour days. You
Yeah.
are dog tired.
You're
But
like, you
then
better be the first person on the MLS portal at 4 a.m. to
yeah,
get that
Yeah.
property.
property alert, I'm here. Where's my realtor?
Yeah. Totally. Is there anything like if you had to say this is one thing I wish I had done differently, or this is one piece of advice I would give to somebody that wants to get started, is there something that stands out to you?
I want to hear your answer.
I think mine was like I feel like when I first started, I couldn't fathom how far you could go with real estate. So I would I feel like I was kind of shy, kind of nervous, and I would only approach people that, maybe had owned their own home, or maybe had one extra rental that they were using as a vacation rental or something. And I think I was so nervous to talk to someone who has 10, 20 properties. I was like, why would they talk to me? I don't own anything right now, right?
Yeah.
And I think I wish I had put myself out there a little bit more and had more confidence to network at that level, because someone that owns, 10, 20 commercial real estate, other types of properties, will give you different advice than somebody who bought their primary residence. And I think when I was first starting out, I didn't realize that having that gap in knowledge could have been something that could have blocked me in terms of scaling real estate. If you buy one property and it ruins your debt ratios, and then you're like, oh, I can't get out of this now, or I have to sell it. I think that's something I wouldn't have known at that time frame. So I think I would say, don't be afraid to, sit in bigger rooms where you have nothing in common with
take
any
up
of the
space,
people. And
Yeah.
learn from that, because I think you can scale a lot quicker and learn a lot quicker from networking with people like that.
I love that so much. And I honestly, I do think real estate investors like to share stories. I think once you get going,
100%,
they
yeah.
like to collaborate.
Totally,
they want to
yeah.
hear, what other people are doing, and they want to share what they're doing, and they're proud of what they've done,
Mhm.
So I love that.
I think you can learn a lot from just hearing about problems and not experiencing them yourself
Yeah.
too. Like I would think I always try and take advice from people who have, done what you want to do, but also aren't afraid to like, say, hey, this went totally wrong for me, right? Because you
Yeah.
can then you're like, okay, how do I mitigate this if I run into it? And I think like people that are like willing to share, not only their successes, but also their failures are like super beneficial to have in your corner as well.
Yeah.
I don't know what you guys' experience have been like, but for mine, I've noticed that like, no matter who I talk to, and again, like getting the confidence to take up space, but it's like talking to real estate investors has been the most like welcoming community. And I've worked in oil and gas, I've worked in tech. It's not only is there like I almost always they're willing to share their horror stories and their blunders and their mistakes, and there's no shame. And then it also makes you feel comfortable. Yeah, like I did this stupid thing and nobody judges you, but there's also no competition. They're not like, how many doors do you have though? How many doors? What's your report? Like I never feel that. Like it's very much, oh, that's sick. Hey, what are you working on? Well, I'm like, it never feels like this competition. It feels like this, like you're psyched, I'm psyched. It's so contagious. Like, let's like lean into the conversation. No matter who I talk to in the real estate world, it's been just like super cool space to be in.
I think you're always worried there's going to be this like scarcity approach where they're like, oh, I know this secret that I can't tell you
about that
anything about that, right?
But
You can't find this, right? But I think what you realize is like, no matter what level of success you get, you're never going to have all the time and money. You're never going to have all of the opportunities or be in the right space to make all those moves. So like, I think people, you know what I mean? You want to meet other real estate investors and you want to learn from other people. Also, if you want to do any private deals too, where you don't have to, you can just go to the lawyer and sign, it's great to have those people in your network too, right? So
yeah, absolutely. And I think too, like this, I'm gonna put this out there so the whole world hears me say it. But I also think, on some of these bigger deals, like how cool is it to meet somebody that like you've built no trust over the last 5 or 7 years and say like, why don't we buy an apartment building, And, it's a cool community of people that often you meet that you're like, wow, oh, those two guys did that together. Oh, those two girls did that together. It's really cool, right? And I think once you just start, putting yourself out there as somebody that wants to, share authentically about what they're doing in that space, good things come back, right?
I think you get to this point and you like can't stop talking about it either. I'm pretty sure all my friends are so sick at me talking about real estate investing. So it's nice to have like other people that also want to just spend the entire conversation talking about the same thing you want to talk about.
9 out of 10 people want you to shut up, but the one is no, tell me more.
What have you been doing?
And then you're like, these are my people.
Do you have 7 hours to talk? Because I need you. 100%.
Totally. So, okay, tell me, if you had one, is there anything that you would say?
No, I saw this question that you had sent us earlier, and I was thinking about it on the drive here, and I was like, oh, this. And I was like, no, there's as much as I say, like, I would do this. If I were to go back into Sydney's shoes, like, no, I wouldn't. Like, I was like, I would have bought 2 houses in 2019 or 2020 because they were so cheap. No, I wouldn't. I was scared shitless buying the first one. Like, I wouldn't have bought a second one. I was like horrified for the first year. Or like, I don't know, think of, maybe I should have known more about using, like, pulling the equity out, like that 80%, using homes as a vehicle for cash. Like I fumbled into that piece of information accidentally trying to buy a car like that. And that's kind of something where I'm like, I wish that I had researched that more and understood that more, because I listened to the podcast and I remember hearing about it and being like, that's cool, but never really understanding it. And then 3 years into my journey, I wanted to buy a car and I wanted to take money out of a line of credit linked to a house. And the lady was like, okay, let me do some math. Yep. So you have $140,000 available to you. And I was like, I thought I had 12. So where's this money coming from? This is not my money. I don't know whose this is. And I remember calling you and being like, Renee, what does this mean? I'm so confused. And like, I just didn't know. So I think I wish that I did more research. I was thinking about that on the drive here, but then I'm like, even if I did the research, you don't understand it. Like,
sometimes hard. It's like you need to get that experience.
You need to know. Like, I don't think I would have understood if you had called me and said, hey, Sydney, by the way, like your house has gone up in value. You have this much money. I'd be like, that's a scam. No, I don't.
What do you want from me? The first refinance and being like, well, as soon as the market drops, I'm going to be negative equity.
Like, I'm so screwed.
I think that's like a legitimate concern, but there's, again, different ways you can mitigate that. And you think like you're sure your money is locked into an asset, but not necessarily, right? There's other ways you can handle that.
And I don't know if I could have taught myself that. And I don't know if like 23-year-old me would have been like, yeah, that makes sense. Let's refinance the shit out of this house that I was already scared to buy in the first place. No, I probably wouldn't have. I think I needed to like burn and learn and kind of cruise through until I was at a point where I felt comfortable to do that.
The big one for me, I think so I do have one big mistake that I would do a do-over on. I will share it with you. But the thing that I like didn't know until I knew was that like I was so worried about my properties decreasing in value. And so I was just like terrified about it. And they did. I bought a lot of houses in 2014. And then I don't know, in 2018, they were worth 20% less. Like it sucks, right? And do you know what didn't happen? No one called me and asked me for money, and everyone kept paying the rent. So like at no point did I have to put a dollar into any of those houses. So it's so interesting that I bought a bunch of houses at 375. Like I know that's cheap, guys. I'm old as shit. That's why. But like, so I bought a bunch of houses at like
foaming at the mouth. We're like,
well, so 375, and then they were worth 330.
yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, like I've lost all our money. So what we did is my husband's super conservative, so we like paid off our house as quick as we could. Just every bonus from downtown. Like my husband worked downtown too, traded commodities also for 25 years. So like every bonus we got just paid down, like paid off our house. And then I was like, hey, we should refinance our house to 80% loan to value and buy as many houses as we could. That's what we did.
Yeah.
And so we pulled all this money out of our house and I put it into other houses. And then they went down 20%. And I was like, oh, well, maybe not 2015, but still I was like, oh my God, I lost all our money. Now I still have to pay off my house.
Yeah.
Again. And all these things are worthless. What's unbelievable is what happened? The tenants always paid the rent.
Yeah.
And that rent, there was enough cash flow that it also paid the mortgage from the refinance on my house. And so it never cost me anything. And I just built solid relationships with the tenants. And then in 2024, those houses were worth
way
600.
more. Yeah.
It's unbelievable, right? And like now kind of looking back on that, I'm like, well, duh, obviously that was what was going to happen, Renee. You were just going to hold. But like when you're in it, you're thinking like,
Scary.
I've ruined my life.
Yeah. And I feel like you forget that you don't need to sell a property.
No.
Right? Like you can sit there and watch it go down in value. And I remember that with my first one, I was like, I've Googled every single house in the neighborhood and know exactly what they're selling for. I was like, mine's already gone down by like $20,000. It's been a month. What's happening? And my realtor was like, stop looking. He's like, you cannot look at this anymore. You haven't actually lost any money because you haven't sold that asset yet. But I remember that I was like, and also usually if the market's slower too, like your interest rates normally kind of make up for that. You might be paying down that loan quicker than you would have initially. So it's kind of like you're usually winning one way or another, right?
Yeah, it is fascinating that way, right? Because in the end, it was just fine.
But I'm curious for your story. Did you feel, because I just don't have enough experience in this space, did you find that the market rent value fluctuated with it in time with that? So like the house value went down, because right now we see the house values are so high. Like we're paying now 600 for something that was 375, but we're also able to charge $2,000 for a unit when we would have only been able to charge 1,000. When you saw that drop, did you feel that in the what you could charge in rent too?
So it's interesting. It's not one for one. So like I can give you the straight goods. Like these houses were in Mackenzie Town at this time. They were not suited. I didn't start with suited homes. I moved to suited homes like shortly thereafter once I kind of dialed in the numbers and knew I was sort of not quite nailing it with the single families. Although we should probably talk about the like management time of a suited home versus a single family home too, because like my time's probably worth something. The single families you forget about, the suited ones you can never forget about because there's always a problem. But anyway, what I was going to say is that so in 2014, I remember specifically like putting a house out on Kijiji, and it was wild. It was kind of like how it was, even just a year and a half ago in Calgary with 40 people getting back to you in minutes, And then things kind of dropped off. Right? We really saw like out migration from Alberta, right? And so I was getting 2,100 for a single family home worth, 375 then, which was pretty good, right? Mortgage rates were 2%. It was cheap, right? And then honestly, like at the worst of the worst, I was 1,850.
Yeah, which that amount of money, it's like you don't notice. And at that point in your career, it's like you're building for the tomorrow. So even if your cash flow drops, like I feel like I have a couple properties on the cash flow, normally charge more in rent, but I'm like, it's not about the now, it's about the later, like 1850 versus 2000. You're not going to feel it.
No. Yeah. And so it was super interesting. Like that lived experience has me, and like we have a bunch of suited properties. This is my mistake that I will tell you, I feel is a mistake. It's interesting because there's a lot of real estate investors that just disagree with me on this like wholeheartedly. But I actually wrote a blog about this like about 10 years ago. I've probably said it to both of you, as trying to, mentor you, whether or not you wanted it. I give lots of unsolicited advice.
No, we love it.
But I wish I would have kept my problems close to home. Because in Calgary, getting suited properties was really hard, and the city, it was really, really difficult to put a legal suite in a property. And Edmonton, like the municipality of Edmonton, just made a change early on. And so like, maybe 2015, maybe 2014 is when that change kind of happened in Edmonton. And I was like, I'm going all in. And so I bought 10 suited homes in Edmonton. We built them, actually. Long story, another podcast. But anyway, here's the thing. I was like, I'll hire a property manager. This is fine. I've got a system. I know what this is going to look like. When you're responsible for 20 families and 20 furnaces and 20 microwaves and 20 dishwashers, and it is a 3-hour drive from your house, I promise you, it is a pain in the ass that you will
Don't
never ever appreciate until you're doing it. And so like we have literally burnt tracks in the QE2. We actually have a full-time employee that works for us in Edmonton now because we still have those 20 doors. And even that, we give many hours a week to, directing her where we want her to work on those properties and whatnot. And so when I look at the time invested in back and forth, hiring a full-time employee, I would have been way better off buying those properties in Calgary and keep my problems closer to home, just because zipping over and understanding too. I think I kind of was at that stage where I was like, well, I've done this 5 times already. These single family homes are super easy to manage. Like, how much work can it really be?
It's always
It's all the work. It's
So
all the
much.
work, right? And so if I had to say to new investors, especially, and especially if you're in that residential space, if you can keep it, a little bit closer to home, I actually think it takes some heat off.
I think
That's
there's
my
some
view.
value too, like living in the city that you're like managing those tenants. Like you see things like on the way to work. I'm like, there's a new building going in there. Like, why is that happening? Or like,
Yeah.
this is like, I can see all these ones are like selling or something. You can kind of like
Watching, yeah.
almost get a feel for the market, I think, a little
You
bit.
can also do
differently that
drive-bys. I
Yeah.
do drive-bys on my tennis homes. I'm like going down the alley. I'm like, what's this? Is there a tent back there? What are you doing? Like,
You're like, the garden looks great. I'm sure the inside of the house is totally
yeah,
fine.
I'm like, I'm happy with this drive-by. Thank you. Whereas if
Yeah.
it's far away, you can't do your drive-bys.
Yeah.
It doesn't work the same.
Yeah. Yeah. And so anyway, that's the only thing that I would on a do-over,
Yeah.
I would change. And so, yeah, I wish somebody had said that to me, whatever it is, 10, 12 years ago. But I'm curious about if you're watching anything in Calgary right now or Calgary or surrounding. Is there something that you're like, yeah, this might go, and I might look
Yeah.
to acquire that? Is there something that you're
This is a
after?
new one for me. And I had recently, like, timeline wise, for a little bit of background, we had been thinking of getting our like family home, never move again, 2 years from now. And then we just stumbled into, and Renee knows a lot about this, our dream home by accident in October. And it just worked out that we did it 2 years early. So I was like, I'm gonna pump the brakes. I'm gonna just take a beat. We did a lot this fall, and like I think, buying a personal home is a money kind of a loss in some ways.
Yeah.
It's not an investment. So I was like, I'm gonna pump the brakes. And then you sent me an email being like, do you want to come on a podcast? And I was like, I'm still pumping the brakes, but I'm going to come on this podcast. And then she sent us the questions and I was like, I'm still pumping the brakes, but I'm going to open realtor.ca one time. And I spent the whole Christmas holidays looking at properties. And I was like, this is not pumping the brakes, Sydney. Cool it.
Nate is currently egging my house right now.
Right. Stop.
My
I'm
realtor,
so
you
done.
can't trade the MLS portal like it's social media. I'm like, yes, I
Oh,
can.
yes, I can. That's literally how we accidentally found our freaking home that we bought. So, yes, to answer your question, Kingsland. I had talked to a few different people in the rock climbing community because there's a climbing gym we all really like. And this is all hearsay. I don't know if these are facts, but that they're going to put some apartment building up around Chinook Mall and that there's some city planning going in and it's going to affect, and I heard about this because it's going to affect this climbing gym we really like. And there's a lot of talk about, building more housing around Chinook Mall. And so whether this is true or not, a lot of my properties are in the Northeast and the Northwest. That's kind of where I originally Northeast because it's just like such a awesome area, especially with the new train line coming in. And then I started doing Northwest because I hate driving to the properties in the Northeast from Renee's story. But then I started looking and I found this. So talking about Kingsland, I looked on realtor.ca. I found this really cool duplex. I didn't get it. It's sold. But it was in Kingsland. And so I started looking, and I think even if this is all hearsay, that's where downtown can grow because we have Nose Hill. So we've got downtown, then we have this really expensive saturated area of like Hillhurst, Tuxedo Park, that kind of whole area. It's really expensive to buy in.
Yeah.
And then when you kind of go off in like the X's, there's no train lines and it's not transit's not as easy, it's not as central, but Chinook Mall area, there's some little communities kind of around there that there were some cheaper homes in. And if that is where downtown can only grow because it's restricted by the river and Nose Hill, it may be kind of a sus area right now, but it could go up. And so that's something that I was like, interesting, which I think that, and then I'm still really curious about Ogden, Dover, Forest Lawn, like for the long con, like the city has to grow. Like
proximity
we have
to downtown is
proximity to downtown. And I think like that neighborhood is going to have to go through a rebranding, whether they
Yeah.
want to or not. Like gentrification is going to happen because our city is growing, and we're one of the only cities in Canada that's not restricted by, for like major city centers. It's like Edmonton and Calgary are not restricted by land. So like
Yeah.
Vancouver has an ocean and a mountain range.
Mhm.
Ontario has like lakes. And I can't remember
Yeah.
what, I don't really know Ontario super well, but like Ottawa and Toronto are restricted by like bodies of water. So
Yeah.
it's like they can only densify, they can't sprawl. Whereas Calgary is one of those cities that can sprawl. So when they hit their absolute cap, those people are going to come to Alberta where we can sprawl. So looking at some of those communities where transit would be available that they're not desirable right now, that's kind of something that I think I am going to pump the brakes. And in the spring, I'm going to look at. But yeah, that's kind of like neighborhoods that aren't the best or most desirable right now, but maybe 10, 15 years
Yeah.
will be.
Yeah. God, I love the Forest Lawn so much, but man, it's like it's been a long play, man. There's so many people that have been there 20 years, like just waiting for it to come. I
Waiting,
had one in
yeah.
Mayland Heights for a really long time. Like I love Mayland Heights. There's gorgeous downtown views there, but yeah, it's tough. Like it is a long play. That's
Long
the
play,
buy
yeah.
and hold strategy,
Yeah.
just so we're all on the same page.
Yeah, and the houses are just like a lot cheaper. Like in the house I was looking at, it was suited up down, so 4 units, both sides of a duplex in Kingsland, and I think it was listed for 899
Yeah.
for 4 units,
Yeah.
which a full gut job for the up down on the one side, which is fine. Like I think you can budget that in, and the numbers still were really good. And then tenants up down that wanted to stay long term in the other side, they were paying, I think it was $2,000 a month between the both. So not a ton of money, but you could renovate and you don't see both sides of
Yeah.
a duplex for under $900,000 in most neighborhoods in the city anymore. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what I want, and it's hard to find.
Yeah, definitely. How about you, Jenna?
I guess similar to Sydney with the, I guess, gentrification of some of these older communities. Because again, like location, I think as we've developed the ring road in Calgary, like we're gonna have, I think,
Sprawl.
still massive growth within the city. But I think like some of those like little pockets are gonna like just shoot up, right? Because there's literally nowhere else to go,
Like
right?
bonus,
And
that's another one.
yeah, and I think they're doing like, I'm gonna say make Calgary cool again
Yeah.
because I don't know how else to say this, but like some of the like way that they're developing things like University District and like Marda Loop,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, this is like starting to become a fun city, right? And I think that's been a lot of complaints from people moving to Calgary. They're like, oh, you don't have the restaurant scene, you don't have stuff to do on like a Tuesday night, and I think we're kind of rebranding a little bit as a city. So I think like some of those inner city neighborhoods are definitely going to go up in value, and you're seeing people pay $900,000 for 1,000 square foot house, which I would have thought was insane, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
then so I think that's, I guess, maybe the one thing I'm watching. The other thing I'm watching is more in the like exterior suburban neighborhoods, is the way that they're doing like designs of suites and designs of different properties in terms of like layout and everything. They're so much more functional, I'd say, than properties were like 10 to 15 years ago, just in how they're like building them. I'm like, oh, if you have a suite, you're not like dealing with a weird staircase that like the door doesn't open and like all of this. So I feel like the way that they're like planning those homes is a lot more mindful and a lot more interesting, I guess, or more well laid out.
And I do think it's interesting, I think as investors, a lot of the times we're like looking at transit and we're looking at, really being central, but like I've owned a lot of suburban properties, and I do think like the ring road has changed how I live. So I live, in the real west, Mint Hill area, and like that ring road has changed how I live, where I go, where I shop, like who I even want to spend time with.
Oh yeah,
it's so
Your friends
interesting.
in the north are still your friends because of the ring road.
Yeah.
They're under the south, so
Yeah, like it's unbelievable. And so I think that kind of access, like I used to think a lot about like trains, bus routes, that kind of thing, and that kind of access is actually massive. And so I think it's important to watch those pockets too. And I agree with you that sometimes, a newer property with a suite, especially if you're not handy, like not everybody's Sydney, like, working all day, renovating all night. I'm certainly not, like I can't do any of that. But if you're not super handy, buying something that's already functionally very well laid out, that's plug and play, you're like into that investment and it is immediately making money for you without any other cash outlays that weren't part of the mortgage. Right.
Totally.
And so that's a really great thing to be watching. It's interesting, like there's the two different strategies. I think it's, we talked a lot about a lot of things, just like not having that kind of scarcity mindset or whatever too, but it is just so important to remember deals are everywhere.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
There's so many different
always a
ways
deal.
to make money.
And your favorite deal is somebody else's nightmare deal. I remember I looked at this house and I actually bought it, and it's my best cash flowing property, and it stunk like cigarette smoke. And I walked in and I was like, this is for me. I
Ah,
loved it. And I talked to another friend who also went and looked at it. He was like, that was just a nightmare house. I would have never bought that. I would have been so unhappy with that purchase. And I was like, no, no. This is it's like everybody's market is everybody's niche is so different that and then
yeah.
it's well then from having that conversation with him, he was like, oh, maybe I should reconsider those deals or like talking to you guys even just today. I'm like, I've never looked at a new build, never even crossed my mind. I always just
Yeah.
assumed they were out of my market, out of my price range. But then talking to you guys, it's oh, this is a space that people are looking into. Like I honestly till literally 20 minutes ago was like new build, like primary family home. Never thought of
Yeah.
anything else. Like I just never it's
Yeah.
like even just talking you see like you can learn a bit, but it's also yeah, it's a
Yeah.
cool space.
I think it's funny. I always say I work with my realtor because I basically just pay him to argue with me. I'm like, I'll favorite something. I'll be, we've got to see this. He's absolutely not showing you. This is the worst idea you've ever had. But I think it's good to have somebody to bounce ideas off
Yeah.
of, right? And tell you, like, I don't think you should do this, or I think you should. But there's definitely like way more than one way to make money in real estate.
Oh, 100%. I always
Yeah.
send the listing to my dad, and then I know if he doesn't call me back, it's a fine deal. And if he calls me back in 5 minutes, he is stressed about the deal. He'll be like, that is $100,000 renovation. You do not know how to move support beams.
Yeah,
like,
truly.
stop. No, but if he doesn't call me back, I'm like, we're good. If he doesn't think this is a bad idea, moving on.
That's awesome. I love it. Okay, so I want to, wrap this up. I think we could probably talk for 3 days. We could just like
Literally.
hunker down here. But I do want to wrap it up with just some final thoughts on really tying together the idea of real estate and financial freedom and life by design. Comment to me a little bit on how that sort of evolved for you as you started investing in real estate, over the last 5 or 7 years.
Yeah. I think it has evolved and like it went from being like a pipe dream to something that felt like a really tangible reality. Obviously, there was a lot of hard work that went in to get to that point. In high school in grade 12, I wasn't like, I'm gonna be a real estate investor. You don't think about it. So stumbling into that, I think that's been part of the growth. And then I think my closing comment would be of like where I picture myself down the road. Like you had said earlier, I don't want to be a landlord when I'm 65. I want to be that old crotchety dude, John, who's like repairing your sink. I want to be that. Like, I just want to be
Interesting.
like putskiing around apartments, fixing them up, like few hours a week. That's where I picture like 65. Like,
How about you?
Yeah, no, I think I would just say I feel like financial freedom to me is not feeling stressed all of the time. Like obviously like real estate investing will bring you its own stress as well, but I think it's nice when you have multiple streams of income and you're not as worried. I think it's really interesting because the more you get into it, the more you learn and the more you're like, oh, I could do this, I could do this. And like for me, like I love like design and I love like interior
Yeah.
decorating and stuff. And so once you get more like funds to be able to do that, you're like, oh, I can make this something that it wasn't before, right? Which I think
yeah,
like
which is cool. You can dream.
yeah.
I think that would be, which now that I hear you answer this question, what was your question?
Yeah, no, my question was just like, put it all together for me. And you guys did it perfectly. Like, how did real estate it kind of was, how do you take real estate investing and then talk about financial freedom, talk about what it has become to your life, right?
Okay.
And yeah, it's interesting because I am at a stage where I did my acquisitions. I feel like we've done all the tenant stuff and I don't get a ton of joy out of managing the tenants or managing the properties. That's not it for me. I love the deals.
Yeah.
And so interestingly, that's why I became a mortgage broker is
Yeah.
because I loved the deals and I'd spent
Yeah.
all my money and all my husband's money. And so I decided to start spending yours. No, I just kidding. And here I am. No, but so
Yeah.
for me, it was about the deals. I'm fascinated by the deals. And so I'm not writing off the idea that I'll never buy another property or I'll never own an apartment building or anything
Yeah.
like that. But it's actually the numbers and the deals that's the hit for me
Yeah.
is the spreadsheet. And so I love my work as a mortgage broker because I get
Yeah.
to be part of so many deals every
Yeah.
year and get to help people. I always quote Dr. Seuss, like all the things you can think. I wrote a
Yeah.
blog one time called All the Things You Can Think because I'm like, so many people call me and they're just like, I just need somewhere to live. My lease is ending.
Yeah.
And then literally 3 years later, that person owns 3 properties and,
Yeah.
they've got suites in them and they're
Yeah.
calling me and they're scrounging and they're trying to get, and it's so cool because somebody called me and they'd never even considered that their life could be that rich.
Yeah. Okay, that makes more sense. Because when I heard your answer, I was like, I don't think I answered that question even remotely right.
No,
I forgot
Yeah.
what the question was.
Yeah, I like, was
No.
like,
it was a bad question. They're blaming this on me.
It was good. It was good. Okay, yes, I do think that like from the question of the full journey of like where you are and what
Yeah.
financial freedom means to you, I do love the deals. I think that the psych from the deals, that's the part that's euphoric.
Yeah.
When a tenant calls me to fix their sink, I'm like, shoo me, no, I don't want to go. But I think it's like trading time for money and it being your choice. So I think that's like the most beautiful, like full journey for real estate for me has been like a financial thing, but also just like I own this. And like especially if you're doing this all on your own, that's insane. Like you own this. This is
think you have options,
empowering.
right? Like a lot of people, they're like, okay, I gave up my job, like, to raise my kids or whatever. What am I gonna do now? Well, you don't have to give that up if you're into real estate investing.
Things
And then
are still chugging along. And if it doesn't work out, because not everything works out, that's okay. I still have this great real estate portfolio.
It's life by design.
Yeah.
It's like my life by my design.
And I think like women are more empowered having, I guess, a comprehension, understanding, and, you know, hopefully investment within real estate too. But it's been interesting as I've kind of gone through like more of this, like people talk about like their moms and they're like, okay, I wanted to leave a relationship. I had to leave a relationship or I was left in a relationship. And I feel like having no comprehension of your financial situation or no comprehension of how you can handle your real estate is like, it's powerful to be able to actually know how you can exit different deals and like how much money you have in your house. There's a lot of
I remember the third deal that Nate was like, no, there was something would happen. Nate was like, I'll go on it. And then it was like the financial fell through like right at the last hour. And it was like, hey, Nate could go on or my dad. And I was like, I want no man to go on in reality, but I had to have my dad go on for 1% to make the deal go through. And I remember Nate was like, are you sure? Because I don't mind signing in. And I just remember being like, no, I want this to be mine. I want this to be like my autonomy. And a lot of that comes from, we're from this generation where like we saw our parents in situations where, you know, our moms had their career ended. They had kids, which is a full-time job that does not pay you anything. I see stuff changes like every single day. It's so fast that, I think having this thing, like I can have my properties all the way through childbirth and staying home and like, it's mine. And it's something that I don't lose. And no matter how my body changes to have a baby or how my like mobility changes or my time commitments change, it's still mine and it still keeps going with me.
Yeah.
Okay, for the record, none of this was in the prompts, and this is the best part of the podcast. Like, it's the best part. So thank you, you guys, for totally surprising me with the best answers ever. And if there's ever going to be a note to end on, it's holy shit. So first, like, the entire city is going to be calling me for Jenna's number. You know, like Calgary's most eligible bachelorette here. Yeah, so Sydney and I will vet them. We'll put them through our tenant screening, okay? And anyway, but I couldn't agree more. And being, you know, just like that much older than you guys. And I do have 3 kids. They're 11, 13, and 15 now. And I did work downtown. And I did work for a company where I was the only female trader. And they did write a contract that said I had to go back at 4 months. And so I did live through like pumping in the boardroom and a full-time stay-at-home nanny. And you know what? I only made it 2 months, and I've never thought about it in my life, like what gave me the power and the strength to take what we affectionately call eternity leave at my house. And oh my God, it was probably the real estate. I've literally never even considered that until this moment. But like, my God, that really is what allowed us to do it. And wow, I've always looked at it like from Mike getting off the treadmill early. My God, I'm never talking about him again. That's not even interesting. So yeah, what an awesome way to consider it. It is something that, we've built and we own, and it has really, and the cool thing about it too is I have 2 daughters.
Yeah.
And it's super, super cool that they've grown up in a family that invests in real estate and has, you know, created a life by design. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time you're not told, like you can pick your career, you can pick your family. And I think like real estate's kind of a neat space where you can pick both in a way, right? Which is like
you can
super
tailor
cool as a woman, I think.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, you guys, I can't thank you enough for being here today. Like, you've just been like
super fun.
Yeah, it's been like, like I said, like, you know, I have just the opportunity to work with so many amazing people, but there, you know, there are some that stand out as just like amazing action takers that are just doing cool stuff. And these guys, you know, always come to mind when I'm making that list. So I'm just so grateful you guys came to talk to me today. And then obviously I've had the chance to work with you.
Grateful for you too. I feel like all your advice and encouragement and stuff has been like very like fuel to our fire, I feel.
Oh, I'm like, I'll make a decision. What would Renee do? When I bought that house in October, I was like, Renee, am I making a bad choice? Please just tell me if it's a bad choice.
We did have a few emergency calls.
Like, I just needed to call you. I know it's late, but I'm just so stressed. Yeah, I think that you've been an awesome mentor. And like the fact that you're taking up space, like this is a podcast. We're all women. I think that there's not enough women taking up space and like advocating about it. And I think it's very admirable.
Thank you so much. Well, thanks so much, you guys. And we hope you all enjoyed it.